much do these quarterbacks actually deserve to be paid, excuse me, and how much should you actually pay these quarterbacks? Well, we've both hit those angles on each of our shows constantly, but we've never talked about which quarterbacks that we would actually pay and which quarterbacks deserve to be paid. So, Blake, I'm going to start off with you. Given that Grant kind of throws this number around of 15% of the cap is what franchise quarterbacks get paid, how many quarterbacks in the NFL would you pay that number, and which quarterbacks would those be?
I'm going with like six to eight, depending on the talent in the league. When I think of a guy that middle tier, do I want to pay him that much? No. I think we've seen that with Goff, and that with Wentz. We'll probably see that with Dak, although I think Dak's better than those two. But the point is, when you do pay those guys that are like borderline in that a little less below great, like that Matt Stafford, your team you can't build around that, right? And I think the 15% number is because it's basically like a quarterback getting paid more than 15% is like never won, or it's like something close to that.
13. But it seems like right now, like the going rate, if you're going to pay a quarterback now, you're paying that. If he's good, Dak, Deshaun, all these guys, Allen coming up.
So the closest to actually beating that, and it was 15.7. He was 15.7% of the cap was Matt Ryan.
That's right.
Until they collapsed in just historic fashion.
He played really well in that game too. It was not his fault.
Yeah.
That's true.
But
it could happen one day.
Dudes, depending on the talent in the league, right? Like right now, there's a lot more QB talent as opposed to like, I don't know, a few years ago, you could say. But yeah, I'm going 6 to 8 dudes, and I mean, I'm kind of with Grant on this one of the recycling of quarterbacks, but I think it does depend on the situation. Like we've talked about Baker a lot, Grant, and should second contract. We can go with, you can answer Vish's question, but I want to hear your thoughts on that afterwards.
Real quick, Blake, give me your 6 names. Give me your 6 names real quick. Who you said 5 to 6 guys?
Yeah, like Rodgers. Are we talking prime or like if everyone was up right now?
Today. Who's up for contract? Who would you pay?
Who would I pay? Like over 15%? I'd say Dak. Who else is coming up? Like when Allen does, Holmes does, and Watson was, I would pay those dudes over. But would I pay the Goffs, the Daks, the Wentz? I'm trying to think of other names. Baker, probably not. No. Like those, like the middle tier guys. Like if they're borderline tier 2, like the high end of tier 2 is of what we say our tier 2 is. Those are the guys I'm paying over. But like the mid and below tiers, no, I would not.
I wouldn't really pay anyone. Here's the way I look at it. I mean, look at Patrick Mahomes. Like here's the test case, because he's the best quarterback of all time, and he's up there, and he's going to be making this kind of money pretty soon. And like he's on this deal. It's a 10-year deal.
Yeah,
he might win. The way I look at it, he might win 1 Super Bowl. He'll probably be the guy who breaks the record and wins a Super Bowl making 14 or 15%. But as long as there are guys as long as the rookie wage scale exists, he's gonna be working uphill, because there's always gonna be that guy making 3% of the cap who's almost as good as him on a way better team. It's like, all right, man, well, now you're 33. Good luck against him. And so like 1 year he might be able to pull it off and everything aligns and he doesn't have that many injuries and he has like 3 or 4 guys on rookie wage scales who are ballers, like a couple DNs and a tackle. But it's gonna, like, the stars are gonna have to align. That's what happened with Brady. It's what happened with Peyton Manning. They won their Super Bowls later. I mean, like, Peyton Manning got lucky once in Indianapolis and had to win one again in Denver. I just feel like, I mean, you don't want to just lose Patrick Mahomes. You give him the contract because he still has trade value afterward. But like, think about Josh Allen. They're going to give Josh Allen all that money. It's not going to work out. They could trade Josh Allen for not Trevor Lawrence, but whenever it's time, you could trade him for the first pick plus. It's like you could trade him for Trevor Lawrence. You don't need to trade Josh Allen now, but you trade him for the first pick in the draft and then another first round pick. Like, there's really good exit strategies. You don't have to pay a guy $1 billion. You know what I mean? I don't know. I don't like the market for these topics. It's like You don't have to buy a Ferrari. You don't have to buy a Ferrari, man. Get a used car.
Here's my counter to that, though, Grant. Before you go, Vish, sorry,
Sure.
but how would it like the Chiefs? Like, how could they, like the owners and the GM and the coach, because those guys don't have long leashes, right? Like we're thinking in like a utopia, like perfect world. There's no external factors. Like, how would they
trade Mahomes? So don't look at the Chiefs, because they would look at Seattle, okay? Because to me, the Chiefs are going to be Seattle in 5 years. So what Seattle has is a great quarterback. He's almost as good as Patrick Mahomes, if not as good.
Right.
And they're going nowhere, because he makes too much money. And Josh Allen, it makes a fraction of what he makes. There's always going to be guys who are as good or better than Russell Wilson who don't make. So what do they do? You know, like, what do they do? That's all. I mean, like, having Russell Wilson gives them stability, but they're not going to win a Super Bowl with him making that money. It's not going to happen.
So I think that both of you, I like both the points you made, and I think I'm somewhere there in agreeing. I think, Grant, you take it a step that I'm not ready to go to, simply when you look at marketing and just sustainability standpoint. Like, the point is, like, the Green Bay Packers the last 10 years, even though they haven't made it happen because, one, they haven't had coaching stability, a proper head coach and a proper schematical advantage for Aaron Rodgers, and two, Aaron Rodgers makes a lot of money. But I think if you look at a team like them, the reason why they would be satisfied paying Aaron Rodgers is that every single year they're a team that gets projected to be in that conversation. I'm sure every person in that locker room and that organization that year has conviction that this is our year, we're going to do it. And it's solely because they have Aaron Rodgers there. So to answer this question,
now it's fair to say that the dude hasn't won a Super Bowl since I was 23.
Right. True.
You know, it's true.
So for this particular conversation, what I would say is that the only guys that I would say deserve to be paid that franchise quarterback contract, I wouldn't even say it's the upper echelon of tier 2. It has to be a guy that you're convinced is going to make the playoffs every single year, and it's going to be a guy that you're convinced is marketable to the sense that he's one of those players that, one, teammates gravitate to, and one, fans just gravitate to, where he's going to sell a ton. And for me, those guys in the NFL currently are Patrick Mahomes, Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers. I would put Josh Allen in that conversation. And then ultimately it's kind of a toss-up. I guess you could throw
Would you put Watson in
Rodgers? Yes, and Deshaun Watson. That's the fifth guy. And then I would say quarterbacks like maybe Dak Prescott, but I think that's a little bit of a stretch for him. And other guys, it's a little bit of a stretch. But I think those are the five. Dak, Lamar, those guys are probably just out of it. But for me, those are the only five that I would pay. And even Josh Allen is a risk. Like, you've had 2 years where he showed flashes of brilliant physical talent, and now you have 1 year where he's put it together with Stephon Diggs. So maybe even he's not ready to make that contract. But for me, Mahomes, Watson, Rodgers, Wilson.
One point real quick. I think it's important before you just trade a Hall of Fame quarterback because he wants a lot of money. You want to talk to him and explain, like, look, you may not understand, but if you want 14% of the cap, it's going to be very hard for you to win a Super Bowl, okay? Because it's never been done. And there's a reason that Tom Brady was always below 13, below 12. It's in your interest to work with us and be below 13 so you can win Super Bowls, because that's what you want to do. And if you can work with Josh Allen and find some way to, like, find him some extra money and, I don't know, endorsements or something, keep the guy. You don't want to get rid of Aaron. You don't want to get rid of a Hall of Fame quarterback. But you also don't want to, like, price yourself out of the Super Bowl by giving him 17% of your cap. So, like, if you could work together, if you could explain to your young, superstar why it's in his interest to give a little money back and marry Giselle, something like that, work it out.
So regarding that, sorry, Blake, before you go real quick, I do think there's a way that could be done. It would just be that initial contract would have to be less, but the way you would explain it to him is that you would be constantly extending him. And when you're doing these
extensions, new signing bonus,
guaranteed money. Right. And you're just giving him
like
refinancing, getting that new surge of cash.
Yeah.
Right. Which is what Tom Brady basically did. The initial boost would be like $20 million less, but he's re-upping 2 years later. and he's getting another boost of $20 million when Patrick Mahomes
just
5 years
expand
from now,
every 2 years and give us
right.
a bonus. That works.
Right.
That
So
works.
I think that's
that's creative. That's creative. Yeah, I like that. Because you don't want to trade a Hall of Fame quarterback at 25. That's ridiculous. So yeah, that works better. Okay, cool. I like that. So, and if he ever gets to a point where he's too expensive, trade his ass. Seattle, they should consider that. If they can't, if Russell Wilson is so intent on making this much money and he can't extend or renegotiate it, dude, go play for Detroit, dude, and have fun.
So my one thing that's holding me back from being on Grant's like very progressive ideas completely is what if you draft that Christian Ponder, that Jake Locker, that Haskins, that Rosen, that Darnold.
You're fired.
For every talent Lamar, there is those guys. And that's my one thing. So Grant, would you move off like if they're not good year one, do you move off them immediately or do you give them like 2 years or do you evaluate depending on the guy?
Well, here's the thing, like, do you think the Browns could trade Baker for Trevor Lawrence right now?
No.
No chance.
If
they could, would they?
Well, obviously. Yeah.
Hell yeah. So that's what you want to do. If you have a quarterback like that you're not that sold on, like Goff or Baker Mayfield, who just went deep in the playoffs, I don't know. If you could trade him for the first pick and you think that guy's a sure thing, do that. But I guess what you can do, like what Vish and I are talking about, is give the guy the contract, lock yourself in, but be willing to trade him. Because it seems like a lot of teams are willing to pay through the nose for quarterbacks. So giving the guy the contract doesn't necessarily hurt his trade value. You can still trade him. But if you give Josh Allen the contract and he's making 15% and you try to win the Super Bowl and you find after 3-4 years, just like Seattle found out, that it ain't working, then you can trade him at that point. You give it a shot. But if it ain't working, trade him.
And isn't
because know why it's not working. You have to understand why it's not working.
It's not 15 too. It's like could be 18 or 19. So we're just saying 15 like arbitrary number, but like it could be even more than that too, right?
It goes up and up and up. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. It is a Moneyball way of thinking. And speaking of which, just to Russell Wilson, to echo that point, Russell Wilson, this is the first year, they always, even when he was making that much money, they still always protected him with that run game. And they kept it simple for Russell Wilson with what they did on offense and said, Russell, run around and go win it for us late. And this year they tried to put a lot on Russell Wilson's plate, and it totally backfired. The last 8 games of the season, I don't know what field he was seeing because he was not seeing the field well at all. And it got Brian Schottenheimer fired. And I'm not going to sit here and say Brian Schottenheimer is this amazing play caller, but he's not terrible. And their run game wasn't bad. And if they were able to rely on their run game, it would have helped Russell Wilson a lot. So
yeah, how many offensive coordinators did Aaron Rodgers get fired? They had everyone millions of dollars.
Yeah.
I remember the Dolphins being the head coach.
He got people promoted. He got people head coaching jobs.
Ben McAdoo too.
Yeah, I mean, he got. It's a good point, Moody. He got Schottenheimer fired.
Yeah, yeah. So I think the ultimate approach to this is going to be right. We're just going to have to keep saying it. The big conversation that's going to tip the quarterback market. Someone brought it up in the comments. I'm going to see if I can find it. Gustavo, I saw. It's Baker Mayfield. He's the pawn that's going to basically set up this quarterback market because now the cap has fallen. Even though Baker Mayfield played really good, he's still a guy who needs this offensive line and needs this system, and he can still make big-time throws. I'm not saying he's a bad quarterback. I'm saying he's 14 to 18 in the NFL, and I think you can win with Baker Mayfield. You can't win with Baker Mayfield if he's making $30 million. You can win with Baker Mayfield if he's making $20 to $24 million. If the Browns sign him to $20 to $24 million, I think it's good. But if they give him that franchise-level quarterback contract, then we're going to have this problem for a long time in the NFL.
Let me make one final point. If your team needs, if you need stability, like say you're Robert Saleh and the Jets, you want Deshaun Watson. You need stability. You need to get to the playoffs. You need to keep your job. But if you've passed that threshold and you're like, okay, well, we got a great team. We got a great program. Everything's in place. But we just are paying too much money on this quarterback and we can't break through. That is when you look at, well, we can get great quarterback play with dudes on a rookie scale. We can get great quarterback play with dudes who are 40 years old because you can't touch them. There are ways to get great quarterback play for cheaper, and that's when you start to look for it. But that's not exactly where Robert Saleh and the Jets are right now. The Jets should be trying to get Deshaun Watson or Matthew Stafford or whoever makes them relevant and consistent. right?
Same with the Browns too.
Yes, yeah.
And it also depends on, like, to your point, the owner's view. Like, is this owner like greedy and they're just like, I just want to sell, I just want to sell jerseys. I want to get people in the stands, or are they saying, I'm just going to go and make this really risky decision and it can look really good or really bad. So I think it's kind of to your point, right? Like, it depends what the owner wants. Do they want stability or do they want to risk it for the business?
But again, if you're trading a guy like Josh Allen, you're getting the first pick in the draft, plus a whole lot of other stuff. Like, it wouldn't be, I think fans would, you'd be getting someone people would like, a Trevor Lawrence-esque player for your guy.
Yeah.
Plus.
Yeah. The question is ultimately, and the reason why I don't think Moneyball will ever work in the NFL is because it's too emotional. And ultimately, there's too much attachment, whether it's players, whether it's coaches, whether it's organizations. And if you trade Josh Allen, even if you're bringing in Trevor Lawrence, who could be the greatest quarterback prospect ever, that's what they say, there will still be players in that locker room looking side-eyed and like being like, wait, you traded Josh Allen?
What
you did everything right?
Yeah. He's on
doesn't perform either.
Yeah. So I think I love Grant's way of thinking. I do think there's a point where NFL GMs and stuff have to look at his way of thinking to an extent. They could never go as far as he just went, but I do like that. So now we got to move on.
Final question. What does Seattle do? What does Seattle do? Because they are the example that I'm talking about. Seattle. You don't want to be Seattle. They've been trying for a half a decade. What do they do?
My thing with that is,
go ahead.
I was going to say, my thing with that, for every Russell Wilson, there is that, like, Mahomes, where those dudes are in the top tier. And you could make the argument for Aaron Rodgers, but, like, I don't know, in my mind, this dude's going to go down as a top 5 QB. Like, how do you trade that away? I agree with the Russell Wilson thing, though. Like, maybe
Wilson's more expensive than Rodgers if you look at their contract. Wilson is so expensive, man. So expensive.
So
not off, though.
So I'll put a bow on this with Russell Wilson. I think you got to fire Pete Carroll. You got to bring something new. That team needs juice. They've been the same thing. It was like Saints. Like, as good as the Saints roster was this year, where was the juice going to come from to win the Super Bowl? Drew Brees is struggling in the playoffs the last 3 years. What can Sean Payton bring that's new? It's too much of the same. Look at what Matt LaFleur in this new offensive system, bringing a lot of what Kyle Shanahan did in Atlanta in 2016 to the Packers, has done for Aaron Rodgers. He's still the same Aaron Rodgers. He just looks like a new guy because they brought something new. So I think that's going to be the ultimate thing. They got to get rid of Pete Carroll, and because they can't get rid of Russell Wilson, they're stuck with him. So you got to get rid of Pete Carroll and try to bring something new.
Okay.